WGNSradio.com.
This is Chip Walters, and you're listening to Rutherford County's Blue Raider station.
Yeah, we got them. MTSU Sports on WGNS, AM, FM, online. Rutherford Issues with Brian Barrett on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna, and streaming at WGNSradio.com.
Rutherford Issues is powered by Middle Tennessee Electric. MTE has provided light, comfort, and connection to our community since 1936. As your trusted energy advisor, MTE is always here to help. Connect online at mte.com or download the My MTE app. Well, we're talking about the Heart of Tennessee chapter of the American Red Cross today, and the executive director, John Mitchell, is here with us, and also Jonathan Taylor, disaster program manager. So we've got a lot to get into. And this is a little over a year for you now in this position, John?
Yeah, just right at the year anniversary.
Yeah, hit the ground running, didn't you?
Hit the ground running, and I've been to a deployment, hurricane response down in Florida, and then, as we'll talk a little bit about here, local response, with the tornadoes in Reedyville. But let me start off by mentioning, at this time of year, it's always, just like any time of the year, a good time to be thinking about being part of life-saving journey to donate blood. So coming up, June the 7th from 9 to 3, and June the 14th from 12 to 6, so you've got an afternoon and a morning option. You can come give blood as part of the Honor of the Badges right over here at the Rotunda at the Murfreesboro City Building. So we would like to encourage people to do that.
Isn't this like a month-long thing that, the several blood drives that go on?
Yeah, and we try to, create some positive, energy out of, you can support the fire department, the sheriff department, the police department. The ultimate winner is saving somebody's life with a blood donation, but it kind of gives them a chance to have a nice, fun, competitive spirit within their departments to promote that. But we did talk and did find a good, whether you go to any of those locations, here's something that everybody needs to know. You don't have to be part of their staff to do that. This is open to the public. And so while they're driving their people within their departments to come, this is a good way to support their efforts and just come and be part of the blood drive. And I think they'll take walk-ups, but you can, go to redcross.org, and, if you ever download our blood application, donation, then it makes it real easy to sign up for these blood drives, others. And while I'm thinking about it, a lot of people will come to our office, which is at 501 Memorial, and we just spent over $100,000 from a grant that was provided for us to refresh it. So there's new paint, new floors. So it was due for a refresh, if you will. And so come on over and check us out at the Red Cross Fix site as well.
And so, and that you can just drop in, right?
Yeah, you can, and they.
It's always better to make an appointment, I would think, though.
You can, but what they may be able to sit down with you to do is, if you don't have the app, they could sit down and help you download the app, or someone most of the time is there in the reception desk, and they can help navigate when the next open spot would be if they happen to be full at the time.
Well, I've talked with you and others from the Red Cross long enough to know that we're coming up on a time in the summer which is really slow because people are out, busy, vacations. So we need everyone's help. So if you've never given blood, this summer would be a good opportunity to maybe start.
Absolutely.
Well, part of, I guess, what the Red Cross does is not only blood donation, but a big part of what you do is disaster response, right?
It is, and April the 1st was an interesting day, and I want Jonathan to speak mostly about his team. We work together, but he works more closely with our volunteers that are trained to respond. But that was a really unique day because Jonathan said, I can't do our sound the alarm. I was going to be there in support. He said, you're running it. Well, what that meant was at First Baptist Church on Castle Street, we had set up to do a canvassing of the neighborhood with the church and the firefighters, and we did a.
In fact, I think we talked about that the last time you were here, because it was right, I think maybe the Friday before.
Yeah. And so, but that worked out great. And so we ended up canvassing that neighborhood and talking to over close to 100 people about, their homes made safer, installed, I think, between 35 and 50 fire alarms that day to hopefully save a life. But while that was going on in our preparedness program, that's, proactive, Jonathan's team was already down in Reedyville in response to the tornadoes that had happened that night. And that's where I'll turn it over to him and let him talk about what we did there and that community, very resilient community. But Jonathan?
Yeah, our response really started. We actually started on the 31st. So March, we had a couple volunteers actually at the State Emergency Operations Center in Nashville, watching and kind of observing as the storm moved through the state. But yeah, I think my first call came from one of our emergency managers down in Lincoln County, actually about 4 o'clock that morning on the 1st. And then I started getting up and started making phone calls, and we saw some damage going on there in Reedyville. And I think about 7:30 that morning, Sharon Joseph, one of our amazing shelter volunteers, she was actually the first one, I believe, that got to the elementary school there in Reedyville and started getting the doors open so we could establish our shelter. Then once we got that going, we had, that first day we had about a dozen volunteers show up. We got a shelter established, started to assess the needs of the community, and got our damage assessment teams moving out there, kind of observing to see what homes had some major and destroyed damages. And once we kind of figured out where the major area was, we started getting our distribution of emergency supplies going, tarps, rakes, shovels, gloves, just stuff to help, families with the cleanup. And, we had rain coming in, so we wanted to get tarps up out of those houses as quickly as we possibly could to help save, what was still salvageable in the homes. So it was a great response from our volunteers. I really didn't have to make too many phone calls. They were kind of asking me, where do we need me? So we had a real great team out there.
Well, that's awesome. Can I get you to pull that mic right here, just kind of as close as you can get there? We've got joining us Jonathan Taylor, Disaster Program Manager, and John Mitchell, Executive Director with the Heart of Tennessee chapter of the American Red Cross. And, I guess you see forecast, Jonathan, and you know that there's a possibility. And then as you work through all of that, you just, I guess, prepare, and then there's the response. And so between, in about 3 hours, you were ready to go.
Yeah, about 3 hours is pretty much what we had going. And we do try to be as prepared as we can. This was a pretty long track from this tornado. We really can watch it coming in from Arkansas, kind of coming across through Tennessee. So we knew it was coming. We just didn't know where, and that's usually the hardest part. Is you can be as prepared as you want, but until you know where it's going to be, unfortunately, we're just kind of like everybody else, just watching and waiting. And then, of course, the big thing too is we also have to be asked. We can't just show up. We our emergency managers and our local officials, we do wait for them to actually ask us, but we're always ready. And we've got people everywhere that wants to help out, and we just need to know where to go half the time.
They once you're there and get things set up and established, it's really the start of a pretty long road. I mean, I'm sure there's still some things that are going on even today, over a month later.
Yeah, this is the recovery part of it's always the longest. Our response, we were there, about 3 weeks really for our response side of it. I went from actually Reedyville over to McNairy and Hardin County myself to help out, but we still had volunteers and John out there in Reedyville making sure everybody had what they needed. We were doing some feeding. We had meals that we were bringing out to the families that were affected so that they could continue to kind of work at their home and try to find what, all their belongings and try to gather that stuff up. So we were able to get volunteers out there and deliver food from different restaurants were helping us out with that. Really, the New Hope Church there in Reedyville was instrumental in our response too. So it wasn't just us. Our partners were there helping us. Churches, the elementary school there, the teachers were fabulous. They they opened the doors and they kind of helped keep the doors open for us there to make sure we had a place to work out of and deliver the supplies that we had available for the families. So, but yeah, they're still out there. Homes unfortunately still are destroyed there. And it's gonna be a long road for them to for recovery side of it. So,
do you have picked out, where you're going to set up a shelter, or it has to be close proximity to where the disaster happened, or do you just go in and say, I'm from the Red Cross, can you help?
Both.
Okay.
Both. We've got shelter partners throughout the heart of Tennessee. We have a couple volunteers. That's one of the big things they do is they go through. They keep that relationship with our shelter partners throughout the year, because we never know when we'll need them. This is one of the times where actually the Roy Sullivan, the EMA manager there in Cannon County, was the one that said, "Hey, I got a school ready for you." So that was one of those where he picked and chose it, and we went there. So it's if they ask, "Hey, where can we go?" then we'll go through our list and find the closest. But this case, we didn't have to actually search for it. They, the local government already had it established and said this is where it's going to be. So we just fell in where they wanted us.
So, you have the initial response, set up the shelter. You go through, after any disaster, there are several phases, right?
Correct.
So,
Yep.
After a certain amount of time, there probably aren't people in the shelter because they found alternate places to stay and things of that nature, but you're still on the ground. Kind of walk us through what happened in the response in Reedyville after you got there, set up the shelter and things, and where we are now.
Yeah, so our first thing, of course, is the shelter. That's always our primary focus on day one, is getting people someplace safe. So a shelter is always going to be the number one. But then after that is our damage assessment. We need to know where all the damage is, because that will also, once we kind of know how much damage is done in the area, that'll help us with our response. Because a lot of times when we show up, we're going to a spot and, it could be larger or smaller than what we originally planned on. So we go set up the shelter, and then from there we get our damage assessment teams going. They find kind of the large area, and Reedyville was fairly localized to that, unfortunately, to Reedyville. But when you look at McNairy, Warren, Lewis County, it was really spread out. It was a long track in that area. So that one was a little bit more difficult to figure it out. But for the local response, once we kind of get that idea, then we go through our distribution of emergency supplies. And that's just getting, everybody that's affected, because not everybody's home was completely destroyed, but a lot of homes received damage. So we wanted to make sure they could get tarps up and protect the home, and so they could. In some cases, they were able to stay in the home. And once we got the supplies out, then it goes into our feeding. Now we're trying to make sure that we can get people food so that they don't. That's one less thing they have to worry about during this entire process. If we can feed the homeowners, we're going to get that out there.
And also, I guess, those who are responding too,
yes,
right?
Yeah, we got to feed ourselves too, right? You got to have energy to be out there. Those were some long days. We were there easily 10, 12-hour days.
Well, I was just thinking about, like the sheriff's department. They were there and kept shifts and made sure that only people who needed to be in that area. So, you've got deputies that are there. So, it was a big response.
It was, it was huge. Of course, the power company was there first. They had to get all those power lines up and off the road and out of the way. And so they were they're there. I think they had the lines pretty much out of the way in about 3 days.
Yeah, that was a very quick response from them, wasn't it?
Yeah, they did an awesome job out there. So Yeah, it's definitely a long process, though. Once, the shelter and the feeding typically are the ones that last the longest. We are going to shelter there as long as people need shelter. If we can't get them into something else, then that shelter will stay open until we can find something a little bit more permanent, because, a cot's only good for so long.
Yeah.
If you've ever been in our shelter, you're thankful we're there, but at some point you want to get something a little more comfortable. Those are, the good old military style green cots, and for a little bit they're okay, but.
Well, unfortunately, our time has run out here, but I would like to remind folks that if maybe you're interested in becoming a volunteer, somebody who can help in this disaster or in a disaster, and I would just encourage you to contact the Heart of Tennessee chapter of the American Red Cross, and we're talking about, from fires to storm damage, all kinds of things that folks could help out with. And I really appreciate you being here, Jonathan. Unfortunately, under better circumstances, maybe down the road we can have a chance to talk about some volunteer recruitment.
For sure.
All right. Sure. John, as always, thank you so much. I appreciate everything the Heart of Tennessee chapter of the American Red Cross does for our community.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having us.
And don't forget, if you missed part of the program, you can check back on our podcast at WGNSradio.com. Just look under Rutherford Issues and tap right there to listen back. You can also watch on YouTube, Big G TV.
This is Lenny Farmer with Jennings & Ayers Funeral Home. Did you know that